it's time to look into some specific lexicogrammatical tools which are used in many systemic functional linguistic studies. Systemic functional linguistics attempts to describe and explain multiple aspects of meaning, and it also sheds light how these various aspects of meaning actually interrelate with each other. Each area of analysis has its own set of descriptive terms which actually provide a kind of toolbox for future researchers. Future researchers might employ that toolbox according to their own needs and the purposes of analysis. If we just look at one of the most common proponents of systemic functional linguistics, we have to remember Halliday. In Halliday's one of recent works with Webster, they proposed analysis on three dimensions. For example, analysis of the linguistic elements that reflect on or that present experience of the world, how people experience a certain world. This involved process, analysis of the process of the participant and circumstance. Circumstances are those defined in time. For example, when a certain event happened in which situation, then participants obviously the part and process the kind of action and how it has been reflected in a certain statement. And this also involves a kind of transitivity system which is at the core of systemic functional linguistics. And I must share here that transitivity analysis is increasingly becoming an important component of critical discourse studies also. It enables us to organize, represent, and understand our perceptions of the world, and also analyzing others' perceptions of the world also. In simple terms, we can say that this is the ideational aspect of meaning or ideational component of meaning which systemic functional linguistics looks into. Another analysis involves analysis of those linguistic elements which express roles, attitudes, demands, and social personal relations, including mood, modality, appraisal, politeness in conversation, etc., and how they are built through discourse. This may be seen easily as an interpersonal component of meaning, which act out social relationships. Then we have to look into another kind of meaning, those linguistic elements which reflect on the inbuilt relationship of the language itself, how language of a certain discourse has been constructed. Are they closely related with each other or not? Is there any cohesion or coherence in the text or not? That is an important point of systemic functional linguistics also. And this involves means of reference, rhetorical structure, structure theory, and also thematic structure. And roughly speaking, we call this the textual component of meaning, which also is very important and sometimes carry enormous importance in certain texts and contexts. If we just have a look on the following headlines here, I have mentioned here three headlines, starting with the first one. If you just look on the top, UK falls into deflation. I would request you to look into these headlines with some care so that you can understand the analysis which I would offer later on. Second one is UK's period of deflation to recover within weeks. Another one is the third one. Will deflation affect your lifestyle? It's a question mark. If you just look at the first one, it has a finite declarative clause which supposed to represent a fact. And the major process here is in the word falls, which is designated as a material process with the actor UK falling into deflation. It's a very clear statement of fact. And since the process is metaphorical and clearly a negative act, deflation is seen as an undesirable place, which is seen in the new information. In contrast to the first one, If you just look at the second headline, it shows and it clearly gives a positive message representing a speedy recovery from an illness, from deflation. First one is highly negative in projection of message, and the second one is highly positive because it shows that it gives people hope that things would recover. In the third one, you just notice that it is in a question mark, and we'll come to its analysis. The substance of the whole clause in one has been condensed into one nominal group in the second statement or headline. This enables it to become subject of a clause and actor of a material process, that is recover in the second statement. It is also presented as given or presupposed shared knowledge that it would recover. I mean, it is just presupposed that it would recover. The whole headline is a non-finite clause where the infinitive verb to recover carries a future meaning, and there where that is the place where, or the circumstances where, a writer can give hope or hopelessness to his or her listeners or speakers. The third one is a question addressed directly to the readers, presumably to attract them to an article relating deflation to their personal circumstances. This question thing is usually used to attract people's audience and therefore to build a connection with the audience, and we can see this is performing interpersonal function, whereas grammatically speaking, form 1 and 2 above in terms of mood are both declarative causes. So various forms of grammar have various purposes also. This is what we learn from it. And the messages in these headlines were different. So we need to understand that both grammatical, socio-contextual meanings, when combined, ideational meaning when combined, they convey or might convey the complete meaning of a sentence. There could be other tools which may be used in systemic functional linguistics or have been used. For example, statistical comparison of various techniques used in a text, then comparison of lexical density and frequency, rhetorical structures, as well as corpus linguistics has been employed in systemic functional linguistics to analyze various kinds of text. Then there are other tools, for example, the choice of words, lexes, and collocations, how words fall together to create certain meanings. And when studying collocations, people look into co-text, how text has been combined together, and which words once or frequently fall together that may have certain meanings also. For example, the word family takes a specific positive or negative values depending on the context it has been used. A family can have a benevolent meaning if it is referred to in a kind of protection to an individual, and family can have a negative connotation, but if it is seen as a restrictions to one's freedom or one's realization of his or her own potential, then family may be projected as an obstacle into the way of an individual. So it depends on the context how family has been reported. For example, the very important family terms like brother and sister, how they have been used as form of dress in political and other social discourses, they may carry different meanings in different contexts also. Then transitivity is another important concept in systemic functional linguistics. It should not be confused to simple transitive or intransitive verbs. Rather, it is more about assigning the roles to various individuals in a certain discourse. It relies for that purpose on processes, participants, and circumstances. And it also involves a focus of analysis in the critical evaluation of content and ideology. If you just look at the following, which I'll show in the next slide, in the following examples of the responses to a generalist question, which is just right here, but can we trust Mr. Cameron's promises? We see there would be different elements of transitivity in these responses. In the first response, if you just look at this, his government, which is actor in this statement, his government has overseen dramatic increases in most forms of taxation. If you just look at this, uh, this this shows a kind of responsibility on Cameron's government, but it has not shifted complete responsibility because it says has overseen. It means it itself hasn't done it. Rather, when it was happening, they have just overseen it. Then the second example shows his government has dramatically increased most forms of taxation. This clearly puts the responsibility on Cameron's government, but this writer could have avoided by using other forms of construction, but transitivity on the patterns of transitivity, this statement clearly shows responsibility on the shoulders for Cameron's government. Similarly, in example 3, if you see, most forms of taxation have increased dramatically under his government. The word under his government shows circumstances, and circumstances clearly indicate towards the responsibility of Cameron's government again. This is how certain meanings are created through certain forms, and this is how they analyze through the prism of transitivity. Group and clause are nominal groups are also an important tool in systemic functional linguistics, and they can be used in analyzing text critically also. If you just look at these statements right in front of you, the modern world is swept by change. Then the same, and this comes from British former British Prime Minister Blair's speech. The second sentence says this new world challenges business to be innovative and creative, to improve performance continuously, to build new alliances and ventures. And in the third statement, you see, but it also challenges government to create and execute a new approach to the industrial policy. This is how, with the help of certain nominal groups, the Blair has reached to his conclusion how certain responsibility have been shifted to government's shoulders. The linguistic terminology, the abstract nominal group can take on a variety of grammatical roles, for example, subject or goal, and this can be very helpful. Distinguishing between subjects and goals can be helpful in critical discourse analysis also. Then Fairclough has also pointed out certain linguistic characteristics that pervade in new capitalist discourses in one of his studies. If you just look at, he talks about one of the foremost among them is the processes which are presented without accountable human agents, a certain action, certain processes which may have affected human life to a large extent, but still they are presented in a way as no human agents were involved. This could deliberately be done to avoid putting its responsibility on some individuals. For example, in the construction of passive, this action has been performed without showing who performed this action. It shows that the author or the speaker might have tried to avoid to show up who the main actor was there, and this choice could be very political. Similarly, other characteristics are the use of timeless historical present tense that implies a general truth just to convince people that it is a fact, and the unquestioning statement of controversial policies. This is how certain controversial policies or ideologies are presented, and they are presented as a truth or some kind of unquestioning statement, so that ordinary people may be convinced that this is something they need to believe in necessarily.